Welcome to a new video on my channel. I hope you're fine. Today I want to give you an update of the Proterra earnings for the Q4 2021 and fiscal year 2021 numbers. The topics I want to cover on the screen, so feel free to jump any way you want. The revenue for the company has been records of 68 million in total, whereas 55 million came from the transit segment. 30 millions have been generated by the power and energy segment. They didn't separate the revenues for these two segments. The total 2021 revenue was 248 millions, which was almost in line with the projection of 246 millions. So this is the slide, which I slightly modified to give you an overview about the different segments. So as I mentioned before, almost hit their 2021 revenue number, and I tried to divide the numbers in the different segments. So only estimations. I will show you later on where I came from this number, or how I came to these numbers. And I estimated that they made around 200 million of revenue from the transit segment and only 43 million from the power and energy segment. You can see they had estimated around 190 million for the transit segment and 57 from the power and energy. So the estimation why I believe that they made around 200 million of revenue from transit was due to the 208 buses, which in my opinion should lead to around 200 million. And the reason behind my estimation is shown on the next slide. And these numbers totaled up to a net loss of 250 million for the whole year 2021. So this might be a little bit confusing in the beginning. However, I'm trying to show you the reason why I put this in here from left to right, beginning with the dark blue, the transit buses delivered. And this is all the numbers I could find. So beginning of Q1 2020 up to Q4 2021. As you can see, they spiked with around 53 to 55 million buses for the quarter, and the numbers between Q2 and Q3 have been lower due to COVID, and afterwards there was a top of around 50 to 55, I'd say, buses per quarter. And now I skip to the light blue, which is the transit revenue, which unfortunately have only been reported for Q3 2021 and Q4 2021. And as you can see, in Q3 they delivered 52 buses and generated 50 million of revenue, whereas in Q4 they delivered 54 buses and generated 55 million. So this is roughly 1 million per bus. That's the reason why I estimated that there have been around 200 million of revenue due to the 208 buses delivered. So now going back to the orange part, which is the battery systems which they made, and as you can see in the beginning of Q1 there was almost none, and then afterwards again lower numbers during Q4 and Q1 2021 this year. However, afterwards there have been a drastic increase, as you can see, from 30 more than doubled, and then almost doubled again from Q3 to Q4. This is due to the ramp up of production, and I estimate that there shouldn't be a huge increase for Q1 2022. However, it should top out around maybe 150, maybe up to 160 battery systems provided, I think. However, it's still a huge increase compared to the quarters before. So then in gray you can see the megawatt of charging infrastructure installed, and as you can see, it's not really stable. There are a lot of fluctuations, and unfortunately there's no positive trend. The top was in Q3 2020, and afterwards the numbers didn't improve a lot. However, there have been shortages, which I will be covering later on. Afterwards, the total revenue, and unfortunately they only gave this number beginning in Q2 2021. That's why there are a few numbers or data missing. As you can see, slow but steady growth in the quarters of the total revenue, and later, as I mentioned before, the transit revenue, and in green the power and energy revenue, which was about 12 and 13, so almost stable. Another important part, I think, for company unit stage, this early stage, is the cash and the cash equivalent which the company has. And again, they only provided the numbers beginning in Q2 2021, and from Q2 to Q4 they lost around 100 million of cash and cash equivalent. Something to keep in mind just in general, and considering the net loss of around 250 million per year, so they have around 2.5 years of cash burn in the back. So this is, I'd say, a pretty good number for this company, so they can endure at least 2 years for the future. So now I want to give you an update of the guidance in comparison to their projection. The 2022 guidance has been reduced from around 440 million to a range between 300 and 325 million, and they expect to generate 100 million of revenue next year from power and energy area alone. So now I want to just check if these numbers are reasonable, and the record revenue Q4 should be a guideline in my opinion. If they have four quarters like the last quarter, they would generate around 270 million. So if you now come back to the 1 million per bus and guess that they have around 40 buses per quarter at an actual rate, they have around 200 buses, which leads to around 200 million. However, they want to scale up their, or they want to introduce a second shift, and they could get to 225 buses if they have 1 quarter with 2 shifts in total. So if you now add all that together, 100 million of the powered and energy segment, in addition to 200 to 225 buses in total, this hits exactly the numbers, and therefore I think these guidances are at least realistic. I think, dependent if the supply chains will get better soon, or maybe sooner, they might even increase or exceed the guidance, which would be a good sign. However, I think they wouldn't exceed it by a huge margin or a huge number, because I doubt that the supply chains will ease pretty soon. So if you think maybe even further, what about if they have 2 shifts of for the transit running? This would lead to around 400 buses or 400 million of revenue. And if you jump now into there it is, in the numbers again. So if you think that they can scale to 2 shifts for 2023 in total, then they would have around 400 millions of revenue, which is still around 90 million lower than what they initially projected. And also, if you have a look at their projections for powered and energy segment, it's around 350 million, so almost 3.5x from what they expect to generate in revenue next year. So this is a huge difference, and something which I'm not sure they will be able to pull, but I'd be happy if they could. So something to keep in mind, especially because 2023 should be the first year of positive EBITDA with the company, so this might be in danger. However, still, if they only will be EBITDA positive in 2024, I think that's still a good sign. So now, after these what if scenarios, can they still have these numbers, or at least can they have the backlog? And this is something to keep in mind, because even if they have the capacity, theoretically, they still need to have the orders and the backlog to do this. In the earnings call, the CEO said there's demand, but the scaling is tough, especially due to the supply chain issues. The backlog right now is around 1.3 billion, and 800 million of these 1.3 billion are contracted orders for the Proterra powered segment, and these are contracted until 2025. However, in the actual capacity, this would be around 8 years of revenues. And 850 million was the backlog for the transit segment, which is around 2.5 years actual capacity right now. So something to keep in mind is also the infrastructure bill, which will provide tailwind regardless of other factors. So even if we would go into a recession, this money would still be there, and this is a good sign. I think for these companies in this segment right now, there will be a lot of money coming in the future, no matter what the circumstances. And they also mentioned in the, I think the letter was it, in the Q4 letter, that the funds have not been made available to the transit agencies. So we will definitely see a lot of new orders flowing in the near future. So now to come back to the reasons why they fell short for their revenue projections. There are, I think, two major parts. For the transit area, supply chains didn't allow efficient scale up to do shifts for the buses, and therefore not a lot of not a huge increase. As you can see, the number flattened out around 50-ish numbers per quarter. And this was also due to the shortage of wiring harness connectors, metal fabrication, and other parts. Additionally, labor shortages negatively impacted production timelines. On the one hand, labor shortages from the suppliers and also for the company itself. And the other part was the energy segment. The shortage of critical charging hardware negatively impacted the number of megawatt they could install. So this should ease in the future, however, when they couldn't tell, and this is also, I think, not realistically to tell right now. However, I think at least to the first half of 2022, these struggles will continue, unfortunately. So, what about the future? What about the expansion in the future, and what about the supply chain for the future? The new battery factory in Korea should be running in Q4 2022, which should lead to more than 3x the actual capacities, which is a huge increase. So this would ramp up the revenues a lot. However, it will only be fully seen in the numbers in 2023. So the next part would be the second shift for buses. However, unfortunately, the timing is still not sure, depending on the supply chain issues. The good thing about it is the production capability is available right now, and also the quality management systems are in place. So if the supply chain is figured out, then they will start hiring, and then they could start immediately. The next part is their critical supply chain, so the most critical part are the batteries, which are provided by LG Energy Solutions, and they have a long-term supply agreement, I think, until 2028. So without this, the company would be in danger of not being able to deliver anything they need. However, with this contract, I think they are almost sure for the future, at least from this side. And the last part, which they addressed in the earnings call, was inflation. They already increased prices. I also think we saw this in the transit segment, just comparison of Q3 and Q4, where Q3 was a little bit less than 1 million and Q4 was more than 1 million. They also checked to reprice the backlog. I think they also mentioned in the earnings call that they have some ability for existing contracts to adjust the price according to inflation, and they also check to reprice the other backlogs. So this might also help them to get the increase of price to the customers. So the last point I want to cover today was the points I will be considering in the future, and the most important thing will be the scaling. So how fast will the scaling be, and how fast can they ramp up the different new facilities, and also the new second shift for the transit bus. I think these are the most important things to watch out for the future. And in addition to this, also supply chain sure. If they can't ease the supply chain issues, then they won't be able to scale up as fast as they want. So these two go in tandem. Maybe if they get more orders or higher volume orders, they will be treated preferred from the customers and suppliers, especially suppliers. This would also, I think, help for the future. The number of cash at hand is also important, reason being otherwise there might be dilution if there's not enough cash. However, actually right now I think it looks pretty good. So they have 2 to 2.5 years of cash at hand. And the last thing, something maybe I'm not sure if I missed that they did in the beginning, but it's a little bit suspicious to me why they would put Proterra Powered, which actually performed really well and will be performing really well in the future, together with Proterra Energy, which has a low growth. Maybe this is to hide the low growth and slow growth for the energy system, but I'm not sure if this is the case or if this is something I'm just interpreting. So this is something I also want to have a look in the future, and maybe they will split it up again, or split it up, not sure, but yeah, we'll see. So all in all, I think given the circumstances with the supply chain issues, the company had posted pretty good earnings, and I think also for the future, even though so they cut their guidance, I think it's not that bad as it looks in the beginning, and given the circumstances, I think it's reasonable. And if there would have been no supply chain issues, I think they could have almost made it their projections. So this is, at least in my opinion, a positive sign, and really interesting to follow along with the company. And yeah, hope you liked the video. Until next time, have a good day. Bye bye.